Welcome to The Little Things You Hear Together, where we dive deep into Broadway cast albums to figure out why some hit harder than others. My name is Alex Asp, and my guest today is Kayla Burfeind. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, this is our second of the kind of special strange episodes. After last week talking about the promotional albums, this week we are discussing the unofficial audio, aka bootleg audio that's available online. So we have two shows that we're going to talk about today. The first is going to be Teddy and Alice, which, yes, nobody's ever heard of that. And the second is Cabaret, which everybody's heard of. So what is your relationship to these shows?
Well, I was unfamiliar with Teddy and Alice until you told me about it. I was familiar with the story of Alice Roosevelt. I knew about her and I was like, oh, that would be super cool to make a musical about her. The way I would do so would not be the way they chose to do it. But I was not familiar. I have watched, there's an entire, it almost looks like a pro shot. It doesn't look like it was filmed sneakily in the 1980s, but maybe it was entirely on YouTube. But yeah, it was very interesting. Out of curiosity, I looked the show up on TikTok and I saw 2 TikToks about it that existed. And there's thousands of TikToks on every topic. So I was very surprised. I was like, oh, this is niche.
Yes. So, before we get into the specifics, this might be a little bit of a stretch to include as an episode, but since I'm always more about the music of a show, I figure any show that we have audio to listen to, it's worth covering, even if it's a relatively short episode. I think it'll be interesting, especially just for the sake of learning more about Teddy and Alice. I do not endorse bootlegs, by the way, especially for a financial gain, but you cannot deny their role in the preservation of performances like this that we would otherwise, have completely lost to history. So I do think they have a role to play, which is a tricky line to walk of morally, yes, they're not good, but they also were very valuable. So
Agreed.
I'm sorry if that offends anybody.
To see a show that came out a couple years before I was born, like there's no other way that I would have been able to experience this show. And I will admit that what got me into musical theaters wasn't not bootlegs.
Yeah.
But when you're in college and can't afford to see anything, but you want to.
Yeah, or you're just, stuck in the middle of the country where you're not next to Broadway to see things, or things aren't touring. And so even if you're in a bigger city in the rest of the country, you may not have any options. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll attempt to focus more on the music today, since the podcast is about cast albums. But since we're watching videos, there will inevitably be talk of the book scenes and costume sets, all that stuff. So for anybody who's curious, at least as of this recording, both of these videos are on YouTube, so you can go check them out for yourself. The first one we're going to talk about is Teddy and Alice. It opened November 12th, 1987 at the Minskoff Theater and closed after 77 performances. It is an interesting take. The music is by John Philip Sousa, who most people only know as the March King, but he actually did quite a lot before and after he was in his kind of time as the director of the Marine Band and had a lot of operettas that he wrote and different kinds of music. So it's not all marches in this show. We do get a variety of things. And then there are some adaptations by Richard Kapp, and lyrics are by Hal Hackaday, who is not as well known. A lot of his works have not lasted into the modern era as much, but he wrote the lyrics for Minnie's Boys in 1970, Ambassador in 72, Good Time Charlie in 75, which were all, I think, modest, I won't say successes necessarily, but they were not flops. He just, for whatever reason, those shows have not persisted on. The book is by Jerome Alden, who apparently has a strong interest in Teddy Roosevelt because he also wrote a play in 1977 about Teddy called Bully. And then direction is John Driver, whose only other Broadway directing credit is Shakespeare's Cabaret in 1981. So not a crew that we necessarily know a ton about otherwise today.
And there was also a contributor who passed away before it hit Broadway, or was that one of the names you listed? Then I can't read my own notes with it, but There was someone who passed away and the estate of that person was mad they were included in this musical. They were not happy about that.
Yeah, because it was Alan J. Lerner. So very famous lyricist who I couldn't find anything specific on exactly what or how much he contributed before he died. But yeah, his estate was not happy with how the show turned out and did not want his name associated with it. So a lot of places you'll still see, additional material by, some places you won't see his name listed. So Who knows?
I do think learning that may have properly framed the show for me going in with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
knowledge.
that's very true. What's interesting about this, though, is it's quite a cast. You would have thought this would have done a lot better. We have Len Cariou as Teddy, and I think he does a really good job of the characterization. The look is perfect. You know, he,
And I mean, there's no flaws like technically within the music. I have my issues with how the story is told, but how it's done is, I mean, I've got no critiques of any of the performers with
yeah,
this. They did the best with what they were given.
yeah, and so Len Cariou had 3 Tony nominations and 1 win, nominated for Applause and or Applause and A Little Night Music, and then 1 for Sweeney Todd. Nancy Hume played Alice Roosevelt, his daughter. This is the only credit I can find, and there's like nothing out there about her. She kind of vanished off the face of the earth after this, apparently, which is weird because I thought she was lovely in this. Again, not the show is not well written, but it was performed very well.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I'll stretch my legs and every whistle stop. My life won't waste a drop. My life live at the top. My life, I just don't see myself prim and proper. All my walls mother, some other time, not right now.
and then Edith Roosevelt, Teddy's wife, is played by Beth Fowler, who is known for a lot of Sondheim people as A Little Night Music. She was one of the Liebeslieder. She was the Mrs. Lovett and Sweeney Todd a couple years after this. She was in Baby, Beauty and the Beast, The Boy from Oz. She was very accomplished. I love her voice. She's very talented. Ron Raines, another Sondheim frequenter in the regional scene especially, he plays Nick Longworth, who's a senator or congressman, one of the two, from Ohio that Alice falls in love with.
Don't you read the papers? Isn't that the word? Perfect for each other. That's what we are. Read it in the news, read it in the Post, read it in the Star.
And he really had not done a whole lot in musical theater on Broadway at this point. He had been in a revival of Showboat a few years earlier, and then I know him most from the 2011 Follies, which he got a Tony nomination for. And he did a lot of replacement, I guess, but not a lot of original roles, so he's not on many cast albums, which is interesting. Eleanor Roosevelt, Nancy Opel, talk about a power voice.
Yeah.
Sunday in the Park with George, You're in Town, Fiddler on the Roof, the covered last season. Into the Woods, she was in this most recent revival. She's done a ton of things. And what's funny is after this show closed so quickly, she then went on to be a replacement for Hope Harcourt in Anything Goes that opened the same season.
That worked out well for her.
Yeah. And then the last one I want to mention is Karen Ziemba as Belle Hagner. I don't even know who that is. I couldn't tell in the video. But she's got and this is her first original principal role. She'd had like ensemble roles and replacements, but this was her first principal role on Broadway that she originated. And she would go on to become more known for things like Steel Pier, Contact, Never Gonna Dance, Curtains, and a lot of strong regional work, especially in the DC area. She's done a lot of stuff. So this is not an untalented cast that we're working with here.
Yeah, I'm sure I will be very critical of the music, but it is not, there weren't vocal performances that I took issue with by any means.
Yeah. What would you say is the story that we are telling in this show?
So it's not, like I said, it's not the story I wanted to be told with the show because I was hoping it would really focus on the rebellion of Alice Roosevelt. And that seemed to be more of a subplot, but it was her falling in love with that congressman. And it was more, I understand why it's Teddy and Alice, but I personally would have preferred more Alice, less Teddy.
Yeah, she's definitely a lot more interesting.
hmm
It's a weird show. It's like he sees his daughter as the spirit of his late first wife and is very controlling of her as a result. And so she rebels more, and everything that she tries to do, he gets upset about, and they just kind of back and forth. And at one point early on, he says,
I do one of two things. I gotta be president of the United States or I control Alice. I can't possibly do both.
which
And
is
that's a very famous actual quote from
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt. That was kind of my intro to the person of Alice Roosevelt.
yeah. And it's a
But
funny quip, but not enough to sustain a whole show.
it is absolutely not. And I think there was also, for me, it kind of fell flat because, I mean, if someone's going to be so rebellious, I think using the music of John Philip Sousa kind of goes against that idea. If it is giving me high school marching band flashbacks, I don't think that really portrays rebellion
Not
as
so much.
effectively as it could.
Yeah, this is very much to me the definition of a why show. as in, what about this needs to be told? What are we doing here? There is so much boring stuff in it that is just so. In Frank Rich's review of this show, it opens with talking about how the show is full of fascinating footnotes to our nation's proud history. Did you know that Alice considered wearing white and red gowns to her coming out party before settling on blue? That alone accounts for a good half hour of nail-biting dramatic suspense in Teddy and Alice. Like, it's all that kind of mundane day-to-day stuff, and he's talking about, well, the price for this construction project isn't what we had agreed on, and it's like, we don't care.
Yeah, it's like it thought it was aiming for spectacle, but it even missed at the idea of being like a slice of life type of
Yeah.
show. Like I would say it didn't even fall in the middle. It just kind of fell off the board entirely.
Yeah.
And like you said, very much why, like this was not a story that had to be told.
No, and like you said, if you're going to tackle a very interesting character like Alice Roosevelt, there are ways to do it that are actually entertaining and worthwhile.
Mhm. I kept getting caught up on that of like different ways this could have been improved, and yeah, like more interesting music, or even getting more into the dynamic directly between Teddy and Alice, I feel like would have been better. It did there was some overlap between them, but not enough to really get
Yeah.
emotionally invested into it.
Yeah, it's mostly them separated talking about the other one rather than
Mhm.
interacting together, which is a really weird choice.
Yeah, a very bold choice. And clearly, I mean, the audiences in the 80s agreed that it was not worth going out to the theater for.
Yeah. It's also bizarre marketing. The artwork that they use for the playbill, for the marquee, for everything is a teddy bear dressed up as Teddy Roosevelt. When that has nothing to do with, yes, the teddy bear is named for him, but that's nowhere in this show. And by doing that, to me, when I heard about this title, I assumed it was about him and his young daughter, not his, 18-year-old daughter. I figured it'd be a little girl. I was like, this sounds like this sounds like a really boring night. And it kind of is for a different reason, but I don't think they're doing themselves any favors with how they portrayed the show externally to try to get audiences in.
And I feel like that kind of marketing would attract more like families and children in general. And this is not a show that appeals to, I don't see what demographic they were aiming for, because that marketing, it's suggestive they want it to be a family piece. But I'm sure with the John Philip Sousa of like, oh, have a good old fashioned time of just wholesome. And
Yeah.
but wasn't that either.
No, another quote from Frank Rich was, the production's biggest miscalculation may be its complete misreading of the zeitgeist of its own era. And that kind of sums it up. No one asked for this, no one cared, but they thought, oh, people will love this. And I don't know why.
And I kept getting bits of like the Music Man with how Teddy was portrayed. And it was like someone saw the Music Man a decade and a half ago and then vaguely remembered it and was like, we can make Teddy Roosevelt work for that.
Yeah.
Like there's some line there, but I don't think you can just have someone you're trying to portray as entirely good presented in that manner.
Yeah.
You need, that was another thing, is the show just overall lacked tension.
Yes.
Again, with like the why there's no point to this. I mean, everyone knows the basic story arc and there wasn't really any conflict. I mean, there was like oh, you shouldn't be with him, but even that was not explored enough to really sustain anything.
And there's really no reason why she shouldn't be with him other than that he's a little bit older. Like, he is respectable. He's a congressman. He's not, I don't remember if he's the opposite party or not, but there was nothing that dramatic about why she shouldn't be with him other than that he was older. And it wasn't like he was 60. He was, low to mid 30s?
Yep.
Which is, yes, an age gap that is kind of icky, but that is...
But also at that time, it was far more acceptable
Yeah.
to have a gap like that. Like, it'd be different if it was like Obama and like Malia Obama and she was trying to date someone who is that age gap. Of course,
Yeah.
that would be presented differently, but within the context of its time, it was not enough to sustain even an act, let alone an entire show.
Yeah. And also part of it, I guess, too, is the fact that Teddy, and I don't know if I probably knew this at one point and forgot, but Teddy Roosevelt was only 42 when he took office. So JFK is the youngest person elected president, but because he was 43 when he was elected, and Teddy took over for McKinley after he was assassinated. So he's the youngest to have served as president. So I guess it does make sense that the age gap between him and the congressman would be weird because they're fairly close in age.
That
But
is true.
still,
Yeah.
and there's honestly, one of the things that I thought about when watching this is, oh, It is possible for a president of the United States to still have energy and not be an old statue of a man that can't really do anything.
The thought crossed my mind as well.
Yeah.
Well, at least there is that factor.
Yeah. One of the things that I wrote down when I was watching is this is entirely too much drama for a regular family to be going through, but not enough for the president. It's not normal, but it's not interesting. It's just it doesn't fall on any of these spectra that we would think of. It's got to be either this or somewhere in the middle, or just not on that plane at all.
It reminded me of a quote from the movie Yesterday where Kate McKinnon's character says, she's talking about a song, and she said, I hated it, but I wasn't interested enough to listen to it again to figure out why. And I feel that about the plot where I'm like, I wasn't invested enough to even figure out to take a more nuanced look at it. Like, it just really does not hold the attention. And there's just so many factors that did not collide as they should.
Yeah, and they tried to have some different dynamics, like the trio of Vice President Taft and two of the secretaries, and they're scheming about how to get rid of Alice because they don't like that she's taking up all of Teddy's time. Understandably, he's kind of got a job to do, and she's distracting him from it.
She's got to go. It goes without saying. We can't have her staying and running the show. She can't be let to interfere and run a flea in Teddy's ear. If one too many fleas, I fear she's got to go.
But they didn't even work as they weren't a comedic group on the side. They weren't evil on the side. They just were there. And it's like, all right, that's nice.
It was the problem of all of the characters in the show really falling flat. I mean, we didn't buy that Alice was rebellious. We didn't buy that Teddy cared that deeply. We didn't buy that the villains were that interested. It was just very, very monotone. And again, this is no critique of the acting at all. It was just this book did not build any sort of dramatic effect.
Yeah. For me, it was noticeable when watching a second time that, so in the song Battle Lines, it's like the only actually human moment, as Edith is reflecting on the struggle of marrying a man who is still in love with his dead wife, because that is awkward and comes up, and like that's something real that we can latch onto and explore that emotion. And that song is the only time that it does anything like that in the whole show.
And never addressed it.
Yeah, and they didn't, it's not resolved. It's just left like, yeah, this is unfortunate. Oh well, on to the next event that I have to plan, kind of thing.
I thought his dearest heart had departed for good. I always thought that trip to be one way. Here she is, as big as life, in all likelihood. Not only here, but here I fear to stay.
Yeah, it reminded me of a similar dramatic structure that worked so much better because they saw the theme out. But with like is it Days and Days in the second act of Fun Home, where she's kind of exploring a similar theme of I'm not able to love this man, or I love this man who can't love me for similar reasons. And it's like, that's how you should do that song, not have the one emotional moment of the show and never revisit it and never resolve it.
Yeah, you have to build up to it and then actually do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like that at least Beth Fowler made the most of what she had.
Exactly. Yeah, the vocal talent was really incredible, and obviously it's not the best quality, but the fact that she was able to get the emotion across through that is really impressive.
Yeah. So we do start off the show with the March feel, with The Thunderer is the overture, like an Andrew Lloyd Webber overture where it's just one song. But then that kind of takes on lyrics in This House. And it's kind of a weird opening number because it's not really setting the scene, but kind of like Alice doesn't really arrive until after the song is over.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not, he's talking about her a little bit like we get the first time that we hear the line of, I can't do both. The first of many times that we hear that throughout the show.
Many.
But it's like bouncing in between book scenes and not in a way that's artfully done. It's just kind of clunky and lumbering back and forth between book and song. And it's just like, well, let Len Cariou sing. He sounds good. Just let him do that.
He had some really great moments. And yeah, I think that, again, just the clunkiness of it. And if they could have leaned on that more and just given him more to work with, and I'm sure it could have been really enjoyable. But I mean, you could put the most talented people in the world in this cast, and you can't revive a book that is so lacking.
And yet a lot of people try with many shows.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
To varying levels of success. I do think one of the things that ails this show as a premise is trying to be too historical, because that, as I think I've talked about in different episodes before, if you make it too real, you get really bogged down in the details of it has to be this way, and it's very creatively limiting, and you end up with stuff that is accurate but nobody cares. Like, Teddy may have been a great guy, sure. That's not interesting. You have to give some sort of reason for us to be invested, and I think they got too involved in, and this guy loved Roosevelt, obviously. He wrote a play first and then this book for the musical. So I think he was just a little bit too much putting him on a pedestal.
Yeah, and it did almost have the vibe of someone who was like presenting for class and just kind of listing off facts a bit as opposed to actually telling the story. Because I think that's a really good point of, it's just people are people, and not necessarily a person's life doesn't necessarily lend itself to good storytelling. You have to change some things, condense some things to make a story worth telling on the stage. And I think Teddy Roosevelt is fascinating enough where he could have gotten like a Hamilton style treatment to be able to dramatize the moments that are important to dramatize.
Yeah.
And skip over some of the more mundane aspects of the day to day to a bit. But yeah, it really bogged down in the details.
If you're thinking about it as Teddy's story, we're really focusing on one of the most boring parts of his life. Like all the stuff leading up to him becoming, before he became governor of New York, the military stuff that he did, that could be very exciting. All the drama later when he, they split the party by having the different factions within the Republican Party, leading to Woodrow Wilson getting elected, and the Bull Moose Party that was short-lived. Like, that's probably more interesting, more Hamilton-esque. And we're instead focusing on when he was a good president, because not much happened. Like, that's a good presidency is there are no historical bad things that we remember. And, he did a lot of good things for environmentalism and protection of federal lands and stuff like that. Again, that's not interesting for a musical.
Yeah, good deeds are not necessarily good fodder for these things. I mean, I think about like Newsies, how I was rooting for him more for the 2 scenes he was in Newsies than in this entire musical about him.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point, because they at least make him more bombastic and larger than life instead of very human here.
Exactly. Yeah, they build up to him just saying yes at the end, and like there was build up, there was tension.
What a thought.
Yeah.
One of the songs early on that I thought was fun, the 4th of July, when they're I think they're getting ready for something. It's really fun energy, but it definitely feels like it could be from the Music Man. Like, it is absolutely that vibe. Even before you said that, I had that written in my notes that this is from the Music Man, or could be, because it's absolutely giving that style.
But I'm afraid the men I've known have made me feel like Arbor Day and Beth. A small parade, a Susan Brown, a banner or two to give up their due or I confess.
But it does give Nancy Opal a chance to belt her face off, and it's amazing. We always love that. I will listen to Nancy Opal sing anything.
I do think also they limited themselves with the leaning on Sousa so much, because I think marching band music is so identifiable because it is so consistent, and that doesn't lend itself to building that kind of drama that is needed. So when you have moments like that, or Battle Lines, where they separated a bit more from the traditional Sousa music that they presented, that really was the only place they were allowed to kind of step up at all.
Yeah. And I do think they did a good job of, there's a lot less of the score being marches than I thought there would be. So they at least, I think, maybe somewhat recognized that fact and tried to not have it be all the predictable marches, but not enough.
That's probably just my marching band high school trauma speaking there. But
I always liked marches. I don't know. Nobody else does, but I was like, I can turn my brain off and just listen to what's going on around me, because it's the same thing over and over again.
there is that.
Yeah. So I think as we're going through I think it's middle of Act 1-ish, and they're at her coming out party, and then they do a dance, and the song is called Leg of Mutton, right to jail. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen, heard. It is so inexcusably bad.
When I saw that was a song title before listening to it, I was trying to figure out how that would work. And that is not that I think it could work well under any circumstances, but especially for that, because again, there's a moment that at least could have been a really fun like production number, and
And there's some good choreography in it, but
there definitely is.
oh,
Yeah,
that is not a name you want to sing. That is not a dance that you want to be doing. It is not
yeah,
appealing.
giving like clam bake vibes.
Yeah, very that. And the music is very reminiscent of almost ragtime in a lot of how it kind of the syncopation of the rhythms kind of gave me that vibe sometimes. But I'm like, now you're just making me think of another show that did it better.
Yeah, and again with the historical accuracy of trying to stay true to that time where it may not have necessarily suited their ability to tell the story as effectively.
Yeah. It's just not I can't with it. Another song. So I think it's the end of Act One, maybe. We have "Wave the Flag," which is the moment for the audience to go, "Hey, this is the Stars and Stripes Forever. It must be important."
Every hope, every smile, every pore, yes, my friends, and every heart to ever wanted never. Just to live and to die for one goal, one common goal, that this our land flies a star, shines forever.
It's just awkward because it's even worse when it's a song that we all know so well, and everybody has their own backstory of what it means to them. With if you're in band, you have played it and hate it a lot probably, or everybody has something they're bringing to it, which is a tough place to then have that be a song in a musical where you're wanting the audience to all be on the same page.
And a bold choice to finish an act on it as well, to leave, because I love an act one opening or closing number by design, because they're meant to send you into intermission wanting to come back into the theater, and to end on that, just I don't think it would inspire me to be like, I can't wait to see what happens next.
No, I mean, there's a reason that the Stars and Stripes Forever is almost always used as a finale for fireworks displays or concerts or things. It's a good way to just kind of end on a high energy note. Like this would have been a good curtain call, not an Act One closer.
Yeah, and I was trying to think, I mean, obviously, with the telling the story of a president, I was trying to think if it, within the context of the time it was presented, if there was any reason that like overt patriotism would have made sense. But there, I mean, the late 80s, there wasn't, because patriotism tends to rise during like really, really difficult times, which like the late 80s weren't that. Like if this would have been a musical that came out in like 2002, I would have understood
Yeah,
with the patriot or ending Act One with a patriotic number, but it makes
it's
fun,
giving Gypsy,
very that. Yes.
where they end every show with Stars and Stripes. And I will say the lyrics for this show generally are very well constructed from a standpoint of they fit the rhythm, they fit the scansion very well. They're just boring or
Yeah,
or absurd.
that
Absurd in
going,
a not exciting way.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
talking about how waving the flag is a good way to build up the biceps. What? Why are we talking about that?
yeah, it is. I will, yeah, I agree that the lyrics fit the music well, but they're not telling a story
Yeah,
with any sort of effect.
which is kind of the point of musical theater.
Yeah, I would say that is a primary goal there. And yeah, just completely missed the mark on that. And so many of the songs that, well, they were anchored within their scenes, I don't feel like the scenes would have been lacking for just having been a straight play type of scene.
Yeah.
Like music didn't add any sort of dimension or anything there. Like we could have spoken these words in dialogue and it would have been equally as ineffective.
Yeah, and other than battle lines where
Mhm.
we're
That
exploring an emotion in a way that would be tough to do in a straight play, other than that is absolutely what you just said, that this could just be dialogue and it would be just fine. It's
mhm.
not anything that we need to be having happen. Uh, yeah. The
Yeah.
another one that I'd written down about was the 4th of July reprise,
Mhm.
which is so as part of the show to get Alice away from Nick the congressman, Teddy sends her over to China for diplomatic relations and things like that. And she's very excited about that. And she comes back and she's got all of these things that she brought back, souvenirs, gifts, things like that. And so in this song, she's telling her cousins and friends and siblings, I don't know who else there, a lot of people, about all these things. And it's the Orientalism of look how exotic these things are is, has not done well with time. I mean, again, that would probably be very accurate for the 1900s to the early 1910s of how people would have thought about China and other East Asian countries.
And I do think that would be another opportunity that if had been slightly reworked could have worked a lot better, because that could have been a moment to advance Alice's character of like, I did all these things. I went here, I did this, as opposed to like, look at these exotic things that I brought back. Like, focus on her experience, not the
Yeah.
item.
Yeah.
And that could really recontextualize the song to make it somewhat more effective at establishing Alice as a character.
Yeah. Rather than it literally is just her singing about the things that she brought back. And that's okay. Sure.
You
How-
can do that.
How exciting. We're all so excited.
In a tea house of Kyoto, that's a city in Japan. I took lessons from a geisha who agreed to teach me the language of the fan.
Election Eve is definitely very operetta. It is feeling like a Gilbert and Sullivan type of deal, which apparently I listened to Dr. Broadway podcast, which I just learned about recently, and they're talking about how in the early days of musical theater, John Philip Sousa would go to London and listen and watch the Gilbert and Sullivan premieres, and then would come back, and he had such a great memory he could just recreate the entire score when he got back to the US. And then this is kind of why we have copyright law in the United States, is because he went and stole, and Gilbert and Sullivan were like, no, you can't do that. And the US was like, well, we don't have any law saying you can't do that. And that's why eventually Gilbert and Sullivan premiered their later works in the US, because after the US had copyright law, it was stronger than anywhere else in the world. And they could protect their work by doing it here first and then go to London the next week.
That is fascinating. I'll have to listen to that podcast.
I
had
definitely
no
recommend it for anybody who's into this kind of nerdy stuff like we are.
Yeah, that's hilarious and definitely unethical, but yeah, if
Yeah.
it's not.
No, but I think that speaks to when he was in his operetta phases of composing, he absolutely had Gilbert and Sullivan in mind from doing all of that. So it makes sense that they would be very reminiscent of them.
Yeah, I almost want to re-listen to that song and with that additional context there, but that's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's as good as dead. I want his head and on a silver tree.
With steel and oil and labor, all sharpening the saber.
It looks as though he'll have to know. We hate to have to say, we told him so, we told him so.
So Can I Let Her Go is a good use of a well-known match in a very different form. It is... Okay, I was hoping if I said it out loud, I'd remember why I wrote that down. The problem with this score is none of it sticks in my memory. Like,
Had that same issue.
I can't think of any of the songs other than the one that's based on Stars and Stripes. Like, I can sort of picture it, I can sort of remember the vibe, but nothing sticks at all.
Yeah, again, it's just such a flat show, and because there's nothing being built, they all sound vaguely the same.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I meant. It's a typo, a very different march. So it's a good use of a well-known march because it's... But they slow it down a lot and make it much more of a contemplative number as Teddy is thinking about, can he release his grip on Alice and let her go live her life? So I like that, at least in that instance, they changed the song to make it different and more interesting. And maybe more of that is done than I realized because I don't know the source material for a lot of these songs. But I always wish for more of that interesting kind of thing. Still, I don't know if there's a whole lot that couldn't have been done in dialogue, but it's trying at least.
And I let her go, no matter how much I want her to stay. I count on her so I start to miss her if she's gone a day.
Yeah, I do always like kind of reinterpretation of known music, and I think if they did make those changes in other spots, they were insignificant enough to be picked up by someone who's not well versed in the source material. But I did appreciate, the changing the vibe of that was, I did appreciate that. I will give them that one.
Yeah. And then the song Private Thoughts is kind of a WTF moment where everybody's just so glad to get her married off, and they're being very open about that, oh, thank God she's gone. Like, you got what you wanted. You could have a little bit more chill now.
Yeah, it seemed like a less chill version of like, what do we do about a problem like Maria? But
Yeah.
like after of that, of like, oh, thank God she's gone. We're good.
Actually, it is like singing How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria at her own wedding. Very,
Yeah.
very that energy of, oh, we're going to mock you at your own day. Okay.
Alice in the White House, a day we've all been waiting for. It seems she won't be staying, looks like we'll soon be staying. She doesn't live here anymore.
Yeah, it was weird choice. And again, that there would be so many other ways of interpreting that scene to build more tension. But again, it just falls flat with the big tension is this, but that is not enough to support a show
It's not.
or a pivotal moment like that.
Yeah. And there's also, so Teddy Roosevelt had 6 kids. So there are 6 kids in this show. And I have said before, I'm not the biggest fan of children on my stage in a musical. And even the review from Frank Rich mentioned there are enough obnoxious child actors on stage to capsize a production or two of The Sound of Music. I love that. Like in the end, when they're at the wedding kind of thing, we're hearing her brothers talk about how I don't even remember what they were saying because I don't care. But I was like, I don't need the children. No, get the children off stage. No, please stop.
Courage, men, once again, we rose above our fears. I shouted, charge! And that's what made me charge! The enemy was lost.
I think if you're going to have children in a show, it needs to be in a capacity where they're so integral to the story that they need to be there. Things like Fun Home or even like Matilda.
Yep.
But just having children, again, just for historical accuracy, I don't think this show would have lost anything by ignoring the other children.
Yeah, just
It's
reference them being in the other
other-
room, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so many other musicals based on real people where, yeah, you leave out less important family members because at the end of the day, you're telling this story. And if they're not relevant to the story you're telling, it doesn't matter how relevant they were to the person.
Yeah, you don't have to solve everything just by doing this.
Mhm.
Oh, another thing I wrote down, I don't remember what I meant, was for the curtain call, hard to evaluate for the time, but currently from a 2025 lens, it's a big yikes. Do you remember what the finale, what the curtain call was?
I don't. It didn't stick out to me that much, but I want to.
I'll insert the audio here of whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm also trying to think of like how the trends have changed in curtain calls, and I guess I'm not thinking of how they've evolved so dramatically.
Okay, I'm just going to refresh my memory here. Okay, so it's just the Stars and Stripes again, but with more patriotic gung-ho music. So that was an interesting comment of mine.
That would be why it didn't stick out to me.
Yeah, none of this really sticks out. It's so weird. Like, you can't hate this show. There's nothing to hate. There's just nothing.
Yeah, it's not interesting enough to hate.
The most interesting thing about this show is its role as a footnote in all these talented performers' careers.
Yeah, I imagine that you would be looking at one of their playbills years on and been like, there was a musical called Teddy and Alice?
Well, I didn't look to see if did they even include that in their feature bios.
That's a good point.
Because especially for someone like Len Cariou, he had enough credits that he did not need to put a flop on.
That is true. I wonder if it almost becomes like a badge of honor.
Yeah. And I mean, he did do good work in it, so why not?
Yeah, what he did with it was great.
Yeah. Oh. Anything else that you want to say about the show as a whole or any of the tracks?
No, I mean, like you said, they all kind of run together a bit. I've got the couple that I made notes on. But yeah, overall, it's very disappointing because I'm enthralled by the idea of Alice Roosevelt. And I would hope that maybe someday someone will make this story and do it correctly.
Maybe it could be you.
You give me far too much credit.
You never know how life will twist and turn.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Well, the second show that we're going to talk about today is the revival of Cabaret.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Fremde, étranger, stranger. nicht zu sehen. Je suis enchanté. Happy to see you. Bleibe, reste, stay.
And this is the one that you were more interested in, and I kind of made you listen to Teddy and Alice to go along with it. But this opened October 22nd of 1987 and ran for 261 performances at the Imperial Theater. Music's by John Kander, lyrics by Fred Ebb, very well-known duo. Although it's interesting, we think of Kander and Ebb as this iconic pair, but really only a few of their shows are ones that most people would consider iconic. They did a lot of things that we all forget about or want to forget about, but they're mostly this in Chicago and maybe Kiss the Spider Woman for some people. But
that's what it takes, though. I mean, to really into the zeitgeist, you just need one or two to get you there.
Yeah, I guess no one needs to remember 70 Girls 70.
Definitely not.
The book is by Joe Masteroff, based on the memoirs of I forget his name. I didn't write it down. That's all right.
I have a book behind me.
You do.
Yes.
Okay.
Or there's two. There's I Am Camera, and then there's Stories from Berlin, and I've got Stories from Berlin, not I Am Camera.
Okay. Is the show based on both of them?
I think yes, because they are interpolations of each other.
Ooh.
Oh, now I feel silly. Christopher Isherwood.
There we go. The book by Christopher Isherwood. And direction was by Hal Prince, one of his 3 productions for this season.
Booked and busy.
He was busy. I mean, this did not bad. 261 performances is nothing to sneeze at. Phantom had over 13,000. And then poor Rosa, did not do well. But so it's interesting. I mostly heard about this as a restaging of the original 1966 production because they brought Joel Grey back and it's supposedly the same. But really, there are a lot of changes to it. And I'm not sure that calling it a remounting is really accurate. So I'm not sure why that's the story that's out there for the most part.
I'm less familiar with the original production, so I can't really speak to the changes that were made there. I knew it was supposed to be a remounting of it, but I can't speak to the changes that were between the two.
Yeah, I think it definitely shared a lot in common still with how they staged the original. But in the review from Frank Rich, I don't have any quotes because it was not a very interesting. He just thought the production was mediocre overall. No fun zingers to pull out. But he was talking about all these things that were the same and things that were different. And the music, like some of the references are changed. I don't think Meeskite lasted much longer than the original production. But that's the recording that I grew to know the show by. And then lyrics that were changed because they didn't have Meeskite anymore, like if you could see her, it originally was she isn't a Meeskite at all at the end instead of she doesn't look Jewish at all. So there definitely were a lot of changes, but I guess enough similarities that people called it a remounting.
Yeah, and having grown up on like the Alan Cumming version of it, it was interesting listening to it, and obviously I knew those weren't meant to be the same, but I was surprised how many changes there were to lyrics and things between these two.
Yeah, I think it's largely stayed the same since the Alan Cumming production, but yeah, before then I think there was a lot of variation every time they remounted it in a major way. So this is starring Joel Grey as the MC. He I think his first really big role, his breakout was Cabaret. He had done work on Broadway before that, but that's, I think, where he kind of became a star. But then he was in the revival of Chicago, and of course the Wicked Wizard of Oz. Or sorry, the Wicked. Oh, why can't I speak? He played the wizard in Wicked, which was kind of his last big role. He did other things after that as well, but those are the ones that he's most known for. Allison Reed was Sally, and she's one that I know the name of, but don't really know much that she's done. She was in Oh Brother and Marilyn, 2 other flops from the early 80s. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about her otherwise. I think she's fine as Sally. It's not spectacular, but it's not bad.
I also think it's just a character that I'm very picky with Sally, where it's hard to imagine someone being incredible. And I love the character and I'm really engaged with all the productions that I've seen of it. But I just feel like unless the actress does it exactly how I envision it, I will not consider it spectacular because I have such strong opinions on it. But
at least you recognize that about yourself.
Yeah, yes, there is that. But yeah, I thought she did well, but was by no means blowing me out of the water.
Yeah. Greg Edelman played Cliff Bradshaw. And this is also his first time on Broadway in a principal role that's not a replacement. And he would become much more well-known after this for City of Angels, and then he was in Passion and Into the Woods revival in '02. But he's still working. He was in Water for Elephants last year. So he's
Oh, wow.
still going on Broadway. I think so. He was obviously quite young when he was in Cabaret here. And again, he's a fine Cliff. Cliff is just a really blah character to me anyway. I don't know that I've ever really loved a Cliff that I've seen.
Yeah, I think that character just exists to serve the story, so it's not necessarily one you get as invested in.
Yeah.
Therefore, kind of harder to be blown away by one. And I've seen some great vocal performances, but yeah, as far as acting goes, it's like, yeah, it's just Cliff. He's just functions in a lot of scenes as a plot device.
Yeah. And that kind of makes sense that he's the author of the, his character is the author of the book that this is all based on. So he would not be focusing as much on himself as what's going on around him. And then Frau Schneider is played by Regina Resnick, who is mostly an opera singer, but I know her from the 1990 New York City opera A Little Night Music, because you can find that whole video online. And she's fine. She's very opera. The great voice, not a whole lot of expression happening.
Yep, I would agree with that take.
Yeah.
It couldn't please me more than the gift I see. A pineapple for me.
If in your emotion you began to sway, went to get some air or grabbed a chair to keep from fainting dead away.
And then Herr Schultz is Werner Klemperer, who was in a lot of plays, but this is his only Broadway musical. And it's interesting because he has a great voice. I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, he did a great job, and he struck the balance well of like the kind of sweet naivete, but also like you could see that more from the naivete to just like blatant denial of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely speaks to his talent to be able to kind of strike that balance.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say is the quick version of the story of Cabaret in 1 to 3 sentences?
It tells the story of a club in Berlin in the 30s, and the club is kind of the escapism to what is happening actually out in the real world, and the kind of tension between the events that are unfolding in Germany in the 30s play out against the kind of glittery and or sleazy backdrop of the Kit Kat Club. So it's where people go to escape this, but as the kind of fascism takes hold, there's no escape from it by the end of the show.
Yeah, and it's interesting in its place in history because most shows dealing with this type of subject matter are dealing with it much later in the Nazis' power, their control of Germany. This is really as they are starting to rise up, and a lot of people aren't taking them seriously, as the characters in this show will say. They're not actually believing that this is going to be a real threat because the Nazis weird parties come and go, they'll be gone soon. Yeah. And we as the audience are like, oh no, that's not what's going to happen.
I do want to say, and obviously we're talking about this recording, but my own relationship with Cabaret, the first time I ever saw it was Theater Latte Da did it at Pantages in like 2014-ish. And I knew the music, I knew the production numbers from it, and I knew it was set in Germany in the 30s, but did not put together that it was set in Germany in the 30s. And I really appreciated how that production MC, who is kind of in and out of every scene and has his hands on everything, and in that production you couldn't tell what his deal was until you knew he was bad, whereas I've seen different productions where he's bad kind of out of the gate. And I feel like Joel Grey didn't play it that way in this, where he maintained some of the mystery and just like, oh, I'm here to have fun and have a good time, until he wasn't. But I feel like his interpretation of it didn't hit in the same way, but I don't think anyone could, because I knew what was coming this time, and I didn't know it heightened that emotional aspect of it.
Yeah, he does. The MC can be played very differently in different productions, and even can be a bigger or a smaller role. In the original Broadway production, Joel Grey was the 5th listed in the playbill, and here he is the only one above the title. So they decided to make this the Joel Grey Cabaret. But you can kind of have him be in more scenes, even if he's not the focus of it and stuff like that. But I think I've always viewed the MC not as bad, as just self-interested. And he's not going to necessarily step up for protecting people that are getting, at this point, not quite taken off to concentration camps and stuff yet, but he's not going to stand up for the rights of others. But he's also not going to actively join in trampling those rights. He just wants to take care of number one, and that's what he's going to do.
Mm-hmm. That is true. Yeah.
And you can play that more nefarious or not.
Yeah. And yeah, it's very malleable. Like you said, it can be built up where it's a minor character, or they can be literally in every scene in the background, or almost performing as like a puppet master of sorts. So
Yeah.
a very interesting role that can be, I mean, it's almost infinitely interpretable.
Yeah. I mean, in the most recent Broadway revival, he was actually portrayed more as the puppet with how they stylized his costume, makeup, and movements in a lot of it, which is, it's still a weird Tony performance from Eddie Redmayne, but after seeing it in person, it made a lot more sense.
I would have loved to have seen Orville Peck.
I heard it was
very
amazing.
interpretation.
I have friends who saw almost every MC in the show. I forget which one they didn't see, but they were very excited to go see Orville Peck.
Mhm.
So, this is a very iconic score. It'll be tempting to dive into it as deep as we would a normal cast album, but we're focusing on this production and this audio that we have. So, the beginning, Willkommen, I think is fine. They're not doing anything crazy with it.
Yeah, it's not to say the standard, but like it was what was done. And I think there are a lot of, maybe not Broadway, but regional productions that draw from it. And so it feels like it's not worth remarking on too much. There was nothing that really stands out.
Yeah. So What is, I think, a very difficult song to make interesting in general. I think Lottie Lenya did a great job in the original Broadway cast, and really most others that I've heard I've been like, all right, is this song over yet? Regina Resnick does not rise to that challenge, and it remains very boring for me.
Yeah, it's just not an engaging song. And I think I understand why it's necessary, but a necessary song doesn't necessarily make for an interesting song.
Yeah. Good in the show, a skip on the album.
Very much a skip on the album.
Yeah.
For the sun will rise and the moon will set, and you'll learn how to settle for what you get. It'll all go on if we're here or not, so who cares? So what? So who cares? So what?
So one of the eternal conversations around cabaret is how talented should Sally be. I think in this production, they do a good job of Alison Reed being good, but not that good. Because the point is she's kind of a mediocre cabaret singer. She's not fantastic. But we as an audience don't want to hear somebody terrible. We still want it to be entertaining for us. And I actually, more than a lot of things I've seen, I think she did a good job of walking that line, especially in like Don't Tell Mama early on, which is her intro number. I think it set a good tone for her for the show.
How so? Don't tell mama, shout, shout. Don't tell mama, don't tell mama. Whatever you do, if you had a secret, you bet I would keep it. I would never tell on you.
Agreed. Yeah, I think she walks that line well, because I've certainly seen and heard Sally's previously who they're just doing so well that it takes away from the establishment of the character.
Yeah, like, well, you would be doing a lot better if you were actually this talented.
Yeah, so I do think you need kind of that grit, a little bit of like the not 100%. And I think that's not to say the actress isn't talented. I think it means she is, for recognizing what this role needed.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest examples of this is Natasha was praised widely for the 98 revival because she is not a trained singer. She's an amazing actress, and she used that exactly how you described to make it work for the character. And, after that, I think that was kind of a model for a lot of people. But before this, in 88, we would not have had that production to reference. So I'm glad they at least didn't go too pretty for Sally.
Yep. Yeah, I think, I'm just thinking of other ones that I've seen where it's like there is that divide of either not strong enough to play Sally or being too good to believably be Sally.
Yeah.
Perfectly beautiful verse in my charming American style. How I dazzled the senses was truly no less than a crime. Now I've this perfectly marvelous girl in this perfectly beautiful room, and we're living together and having a marvelous time.
the song Tomorrow Belongs to Me. What is your relationship with this song? Because it's interesting from a cast album perspective versus a seeing it in the show perspective, and which you got to know first.
So that was one song I was not familiar going into it with. Again, I just knew the big production numbers.
Okay.
Things, and I was very caught off guard. And I think it's a big testament to the staging of the first production that I saw and how it was done so effectively for like the moment of the big reveal of what this is building to. And I kind of liked that it was suspense of like, this sounds creepy, but I don't quite know what's going on. And then having the reveal of it being a Nazi anthem was done so effectively. And I know it's not a real like Nazi anthem, but they did such a good job of writing a fake Nazi anthem that it feels, I don't like listening to it on the album because it feels weird.
Yeah. But if you don't see the show, there's nothing in the song itself that tells you what it is, because it kind of feels like one of those, it could just be a folk song passed down through generations in Germany, but then got appropriated by the Nazis and now has a connotation that it didn't originally have. Like, that's kind of how it feels to me. And when you see it on stage, it's like, oh yes, this is very clear how they're using it and why these lyrics are appealing to them.
That babe in his cradle is close in his height, the blossom and verses of me. But soon says a whisper, arise, arise, tomorrow belongs to me. Oh, now everyone!
But, I listened to the music for years before I ever saw a production, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty song that I will often skip because it's, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's very well done. Hal Prince, shocker, is a very good director, and working with talented composer, lyricist team, they definitely found a way to do something theatrically that is still very impressive to this day.
And I think a big part of the reason, because I'm far more into more modern musicals, but this is kind of my favorite, like pre-2000 musical. And I think a big part of it is because it becomes more relevant, which saddens me that it is more relevant.
Yeah.
I think also listening to that song within kind of the modern lens, it kind of takes on the side eye that you give someone who's like a little too into America.
Yeah.
It has a similar kind of like, you're a little too proud to be German, and in context, I don't love what this is doing.
Yes, very that. And even in the show, I'd forgotten until I watched this video, the first time that it's sung, or it's like often done on the radio where it doesn't have any of that connotation. So you're first introduced to it in a more neutral, just, okay, this is just a song. And then it's the reprise at the end of Act 1 that is like the, oh no moment, which again, very smart to do that.
And my first introduction to it was on stage, not knowing what was happening and hearing it on like the gramophone and whatever. And it's like a creepy child singing. And then the MC turned around and had a smear of paint on his upper lip. And you're like, oh.
We're being very clear here.
Yes.
Oh. So it's interesting. There's a song called Don't Go, which from what I can tell is only in this production. It is not in any other version of the show that's ever been done on any of the other cast albums out there. I'm not sure why they felt the need to add it. It's pretty, but it's forgettable.
No, I can't wish you luck as you're walking away. Please stay, Sally, stay, Sally, stay. You may think I'll be glad if Von Schwarzenbaum calls, but that's not so. Don't go, Sally.
And I don't think, again, it has the same issue of, had it not been there, I don't think it negatively affects the storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand the utility of adding it.
Yeah, you can get the same emotion in a well-acted 30-second don't go, like he's begging her not to leave. I'm like, all right, well, this is just taking a long time.
And it almost betrays kind of the way music is used in this show. Like, there are obviously songs that function within the context of a normal musical theater song of advancing the plot, but with how many of the songs happen next to the plot without engaging, I feel like you maybe lose some of that emotion because it is trying to advance the plot when that's not been the theme that's been established in what has led up to that.
Yeah. It's always the trick of including diegetic music in your show is it's very easy to just have it be like pop music or whatever and not be part of it. And then, oh, well, I want to do it here, but I didn't do it before. So now it's just kind of weird. And yeah, I don't need this song though.
Yeah, it's unnecessary, and I'm not mad they cut it from future versions.
Yeah. So the biggest surprise to me, maybe, well, I might be saying a lot, but in the Money song, this is the first time I've ever heard both versions kind of mashed together. Because the original Money song, I always like the Me, I'm Sitting Pretty. I've got all the money I need, that version of it. And then for the, the 98 revival onward, at least, it's pretty much always the Money Makes the World Go Round instead. But I like having both of them.
Me, I'm sitting pretty. I've got all the money I need. Money makes the world go round, the world go round, the world go round. Money makes the world go round. It makes the world go round.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then also like the addition at the end of like introducing all of the Kit Kat girls as different monastery units and like the RuPauls. And
that was weird. Yeah.
That caught me off guard where I didn't love it. And I was also like, why was this?
Yeah, like it's kind of gross, but also it's just, this is taking a lot of time for something that doesn't matter. And I don't care. Like you're not advancing character, you're not advancing story. You're just making the song take way longer, and I'm bored.
And I get that they were probably trying to get it to function as like continuing like the seediness and like the nature of the Kit Kat Club, but I think that is pretty well established. And if it's not established by that point in the show, you have bigger problems.
Yeah. Maybe they just needed longer for a costume change. Who knows?
That could be.
Yeah. So yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but in Married, that's the one song that Herr Schultz really gets to shine. And Werner Klemperer sounds so lovely. I really would love to have had him do more musicals.
Yeah, he was very endearing during that song, and I even enjoyed like the dialogue bits leading up to it of like, why did I say we were getting married? And
why did I say 3 weeks?
Yeah, I spent 3 months or 3 years, and I did think that was a very endearing moment. And yeah, the vocals, I think he played that really well, because again, that's another show where it's not like you need to be hitting the highest notes or song where you need to hit the highest notes or that, but
and a lot of times Herr Schultz is not a good singer.
Yep, but to have the good singing and to strike the balance of making him more grounded, I just really appreciated.
For you wake one day, look around and say, somebody wonderful married me.
Yeah, I think he does a really good job of what you really want. Like the way to really get sucked in emotionally in this show, I think, is through Herr Schultz, because he's the one that when it's revealed that he is it a reveal that he's Jewish, or is that early on? I don't remember. But when you realize that he is going to be the center of the conflict, the main conflict of the Nazis starting to rise to power, and the, should Frau Schneider marry a Jewish man, knowing what's probably going to be coming. And it just, the more you've made him likable and endearing, the harder that hits when she's having to make that decision. Oh.
And I do think that might be part of the reason why Don't Go didn't feel the same, is because the stakes aren't there for Cliff and Sally.
Yeah.
So again, it felt like a build up to nothing, whereas this is building up to one of the primary conflicts in the show.
Yeah. If you could see her, I think is pretty much exactly how it was done in the original, with Joel Grey, especially doing... Honestly, this has not changed much in any production since the original, other than the one lyric change at the end to really hit the point home. But it is still a gut punch at the end of the song.
I understand your objection. I grant you the problem's not small. But if you could see her through my eyes, she
wouldn't look Jewish at all.
Yeah, it is very effective. And I think it's kind of that moment where the inside world is getting into the Kit Kat Club and you're not able to deny these things around. And it kind of is the tonal shift of the show. And yeah, that is always a gut punch. And I've always been fascinated by audience responses to that in the different productions that I've seen. I mean, I think it was at the Guthrie, like people were laughing. It's like, it's not, and I don't think it was like, haha, funny. I think it was discomfort funny.
Yeah.
And I understand because, yeah, it does bring up a lot in just that one very effective line.
And there's so much variability in how you can, deliver that line. Alan Cumming, I think, is more on the side of he's clearly accusing you by his delivery of,
she wouldn't look Jewish at all.
He like hisses it.
Yeah, versus Joel Grey playing the macabre clown aspect of it, where isn't this funny? And then like, oh, what are you laughing at? Look at yourself kind of a moment.
Yeah.
And I think both are very effective. So I don't mind either one when I see a production.
Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong way on that kind of spectrum between Joel Grey and Alan Cumming. I'm sure there are wrong ways to deliver the line, but
as long as it has energy.
Yeah, infinite amount of right ways to give that line.
And maybe some wrong ways that luckily I haven't seen the wrong way yet.
I don't think that I have either. I think I've seen clips from shows where they do it wrong, but I've never seen a production where they've done it wrong.
That's good. So we hinted at it before, but What Would You Do is a song that, again, can be boring for me because the main message of the song is, what would you do in my situation? And yet the song goes on for a few minutes. So it can get dragging. I do think this is a better performance from Regina Resnick, where she is selling it more than most of the show, because you do start to feel that emotion coming through from her of, this is not an easy choice for me to be walking away from the man I love, but I can't lose everything and lose him, which is what she's likely signing up for. And she has the wherewithal to see forward and know what's likely going to happen.
Yeah, and I appreciated the emotional performance that she gave because, again, it's another moment that can be interpreted so many different ways. And I appreciated that she struck the balance between wanting both to be with him and to protect herself. I've seen a lot of productions where she's not even trying to talk herself into it. She's like, yeah, I can't be with him, and that's the end of the story. So I appreciated that there was a little more depth to how it is presented in this production.
Agreed.
With the clock running down, what would you do? The young always have the cure, being brave, being sure and free.
So the song I Don't Care Much was, I believe, added for this production that we're talking about today, and then generally retained going forward, unlike Don't Go, which was then forgotten about entirely. But I don't have strong feelings on this song. I'm like, it's whatever.
I love the song, but in context, I don't feel like it adds quite as to the story. Like, I think it's a beautiful song, and I've heard some really amazing renditions of it, but I've not seen one that hits kind of the emotional mark. Like, I can see what they were going for, but I don't think it hits the way that was intended. But I do think it's a gorgeous song.
Yeah.
Words sound false when your coat's too thin. Feet don't walk when the roof caves in.
So the title song, Cabaret, this is another one where there's a huge variety of ways that you can play the song. I kind of like this version where we're seeing an emotional journey within the song of how she's singing it, because I've seen Sally's where the whole thing is she's very clearly having a breakdown versus the whole thing is she is clearly putting on a happy face and hiding how she actually feels. And this, I think, she starts off really rough and having a hard time concealing how she's feeling, and then she kind of gets her footing a little bit and gets more confident and sounds better, and then kind of starts to lose that again as the song goes on. And I think that's I don't know if I've seen that choice specifically in the past, but I really liked it.
I appreciated that as well, because I've seen like the inverse of that, where it's like coming out swinging at a 10 and then putting on the happy face. but to have the way she presented it and then to have kind of the flow of the song go up and then come back down was really effective. And I thought she really sold that well, because I do think, especially with a lot of the productions that I've seen, it tends to be kind of come out swinging and stay at a 10 the entire song, which can be very engaging. But I do appreciate the storytelling of
Yeah.
the tone of the song changing and evolving.
Yeah. Sing it strong all the way through in an actual cabaret, not in the production of the show cabaret.
Exactly.
No use permitting some prophet of doom to wipe every smile away. Life is a cabaret, oh chum. Come to the cabaret.
So, any other tracks that you want to dive into specifically?
No, those were the ones that I had highlighted. I could read my own notes here.
Theme of the day.
Yes, 100%. But yeah, those were the big ones. And I will say there's always more songs in this show than I remember there being, because I remember
Yes.
like the high points and again like the production numbers that are more fun, and then some of the more emotional ones. But there's always more music in the show than I remember. Even when I just saw it recently at the Guthrie, I was like, oh, that's right, this song. Oh, that's right, this song.
Yeah. I forgot to mention before. So, do you like the telephone song? I feel
could
like
say-
I'm one of the only people that actually likes that song.
Yeah, I don't feel too strongly. I think it also has a bit of the like, it can weigh things down, but I also understand how it functions. So I don't feel strongly, but I'm curious what draws you to that song.
So, I think it's just the fact that there's a lot of comedy in it, and having experienced it only as a cast album for so long, that there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can get from that without having to see it, versus several of the songs on the albums. If you're not seeing it in context of the production, it can feel a little like, oh, okay, whatever. And especially to a young, rather immature musical theater fan, starting to come into some understanding of the world. But I just think it's really fun, and it gives a lot of fun jokes. It helps to clearly show like the queerness that's involved in this, which in the original it's kind of hinted at that Cliff is bisexual, and I think it's much more explicit in this version, and then kind of mostly after. I think this is the last time that the telephone song is actually in a major production, and then after this, there's usually like one line that is sung as like a segue in between scenes. But yeah, I don't know. I've always thought this is a really fun song.
Hello,
Hello! Table 4 is calling table 9. How are you, mister?
danke fine.
Sitting all alone like that? You happen to catch my eye. Would you like to give a girl a dance?
Yeah, why not?
Goodbye.
Yeah, I can appreciate it. It's just never been one that's really stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially if your original, cast album was not the original Broadway cast album, then it's much less likely to be. I think it's not going to pull you in if you already know the show without it.
Yep. And yeah, that's probably the biggest issue there. Because like I said, I definitely learned the music from the show from the Alan Cumming version.
Yeah.
And then, adding it back in and having the wrong take of like the purist of like, no, Alan Cumming did it right and everything else.
Yep.
Life is a cabaret, oh child. Life is...
Auf Wiedersehen. A bientôt.
So this production was nominated for 4 Tonys, did not win any of them. It was nominated for Best Revival, Featured Actress ×2, and Featured Actor. I didn't mention it before, but Teddy and Alice had no nominations. Surprise, surprise.
Shocking.
But Cabaret, this is an interesting, the question for me for these 2 special episodes is, should there have been a cast album of this production? And actually, before I say anything, I'll ask you, should this production have had a cast album for us to remember?
I think in hindsight, probably not, because I don't think it was substantially different enough from the original to require it, especially when you have the same person playing the MC. I could see there being a justification for one, but I think when I think of shows that were robbed of a cast album, this is not one that comes to mind.
No, especially with revivals, it's always harder to justify.
Yeah.
And I'm sure their line of thought was, oh, this is largely a remounting. But the fact that we have a song in this version that's not in any other version of the show, kind of makes me wish we had one.
I could see
Other
that.
than that, yeah, I agree that there's not a whole lot special that needs to, other than the fact that I want a cast album for every production ever, this doesn't really need one. There were already 4 major recordings by the time this production was happening. The OBC, the original London cast, the movie soundtrack, and then an 86 London revival. So especially that one was only a couple years earlier. It makes sense to avoid that cost of mounting it when, are you really going to sell many of them? Probably not.
And obviously you're better versed in cast albums than I am, but I'm curious, do you think now with the evolution of technology that cast albums are becoming more common because it's less of an undertaking to record one as opposed to when the technology was harder and to access? Because I suppose there were a lot more flops back then, and I have the limitations of my understanding, which survivorship bias. I am more familiar with shows that got them.
Yep.
But I can think of a lot of more modern shows that got them where it's like, no one really needed this.
Yeah. I think, so they definitely become more common. I do have all the data I could share with you if you want. But I think it probably comes down to, if I had to guess, more a matter of producers being more likely now to recognize the importance of a cast album for marketing the show and for preserving it for future use. Because a lot of shows, hell, Merrily We Roll Along, only had interest after the initial flop because of the cast album, and people kept coming back to it. And there are other shows like that if it wasn't for the cast album, it would have been forgotten, absolutely. But because it had an album, it can get revived and done regionally, and they can, I would assume some producers at least think about beyond the Broadway run of the future revenue from licensing the show, things like that. And like a high school is probably not going to want to license a show that doesn't have a cast album. So if you want to have a future, you got to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't considered that angle, but I suppose I had considered it in the more micro version of more modern musicals needing to get that, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves with the TikTokification of it. And you can think of some more modern musicals that have needed that 30 seconds to go viral to justify really anything. I think of Be More Chill with Michael in the bathroom. If that song hadn't gone viral, that show wouldn't have gone to Broadway.
Yeah. And I don't like that Broadway cast album as much, but that's a different story. Different discussion for another day.
Yes, for sure. But
any other thoughts on these 2 unofficial audio recordings we have?
No, but I did appreciate the kind of juxtaposition of them, because there are some similarities, and I think they really demonstrate where Teddy and Alice went wrong versus where Cabaret really excels with the building of tension and how to handle historical events that they don't need to be fully rooted in fact to effectively tell a story that doesn't betray the time period it's portraying.
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of that just comes down to the original production of Cabaret had a crew of amazing people who knew how to make a story work. And Teddy and Alice had people who did not have a whole lot of other major Broadway credits or major theater credits and did not see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, but boy, did they have a passion for Teddy Roosevelt.
At least the one guy did. He brought everybody else with him.
Yeah, but
Oy.
I'm very happy I did listen to it, because now I feel like it's like a feather in my cap of
Yeah. I know about this show that you don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the main reason for doing the podcast, is to feel superior to people.
Exactly. That's why we get into theater, isn't it?
Truer words were never spoken. Kayla, thank you so much for doing this with me, for taking on Teddy and Alice for the sake of getting to talk about Cabaret.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to entice me with Cabaret, and I'll do quite a few things to get to talk about Cabaret.
Well, if people want to follow what you're doing or anything like that, is there a way they can get in touch with you?
Just on Instagram at Kayla Burfeind, and just posting about hiking and theater.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Little Things You Hear Together. You can email me littlethingsyouheartogether@gmail.com. Please subscribe. We're going to be hitting the end of the season pretty soon, and then there'll be a little gap, so make sure you're following the podcast on your podcatcher of choice to know when new episodes are going to come back. Rate and review the podcast is very helpful to make the show grow. The algorithms of the world that control our lives are not, this space is not exempt from that. So next week we'll have the wrap up for the season, and that'll be fun to kind of go through the rankings and scores and see how the whole season shakes out before we move on to the next. Well, have a wonderful day, Kayla. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.